What Lucy needs is time in a library. A moment or two ago, this was how she diagnosed matters, and now, without consulting anything but her own, at best, whimsical memory, she is moving down the street in the direction she believes one to be. A real library. Hadn't she passed it a few times since bunking with Deb, tied to some satellite offices of a university? There is a chance it was a museum, and she decides if it turns out to have been a museum, then a museum will do. There is a gangliness to her walk. She's spaghetti strands doing their best impersonation of an escapee. And Elliot sways in and out of the vision of her thoughts like a reflection in the rolling wheel of a truck belching past. Today has all only been one day. That alone is astonishing and worthy of scholarship, as much as always and more. But that today, in particular, has all only been one day. This day, that this day has all been one day, is something other. A fish feeling chagrined for the first time. Lucy doesn't know. A floor finally deciding if it is eternally face up or face down. Yes, library. She needs the singular closure of a library. She'll borrow paper and sit and write. All very simple. Lucy, you have been overloaded, but let this be why you have been, to get you to the juncture where nothing but a library will do. Elliot. Lucy does not trust her impressions, but is not yet in full possession of why not. Maybe you want to touch her again, Lucy, but that isn't the same as giving her adulation. Cigarette? None left. So a detour is necessary in the exact shape of that discount food market, spelled just that way, with bold words on the outer wall, not quite straight-lined, proclaiming keno, beer, chips, ice, milk, groceries, wine, cigarettes, ATM, in just exactly that hypnotically casual order. Another sign. We now have PXs. Ominous, but wonderful. It almost makes Lucy forget everything she is underneath of. You tell me which kind of cigarette you want, I will see. The proposition is confusing. The man is clearly pronouncing cigarette, as though it is spelled with only one T. Any kind, really. You can just pick. The man shakes his head. Something, he explains, about the exact license his shop has does not allow the open display of cigarettes, so he needs to know which kind she wants, and he can check to see if he has it. Fine, Lucy says, and goes, and well, and then she says, spotlights. What are spotlights? They are a brand of cigarettes. I don't have those. You didn't even look. I've never heard of them. I don't have them. Lucy wants to challenge this man. Tell him to name every brand of tuna fish in the store, of bread, of canned beans or olives, but instead she offers this helpful chit of advice. Why not have a piece of paper that lists all the types of cigarettes you have? Then customers could just point. Full-blown liar. The man said he tried this, but it just led to headaches. Which headaches? I don't have spotlights. What else? American clovers? I ran out. Then just a pack of Camels. Never carry Camels. Yep. This is an old British comedy sketch repackaged for the actual ennui-entombed crowd. This is the reality of what wouldn't be funny about actually being in the situation of some irreverent sketch comedy. Do you have any cigarillos then? Yes, I'll have those. What kind? Do you have more than one kind? Yes, but do you really? Is what I am saying. Do you actually? Yes. Prove it. Good try, Lucy, but now you're the one extending this scene. The guy is just a cipher. This might be all he was bred for. He might have this same conversation with anyone, not interested one way or the other in your money or if you get what you want. Do you have lucky strikes? Do you want lucky strikes? Yes. He stares. Lucy stares. Ah, yes, she gets it. Nods as though sharing an I get you wink with a pal. May I have a pack of lucky strikes, please? And that is how that went. And Lucy knows the library, if there is one, is someplace around here. So she starts dental flossing the streets. Up this way a block, 2, 3, back to where she started, across 1 block over, down that way a block, 2, 3, back to the start of that, cross to 1 block over, and so on. The streets are a grid, but she doesn't trust them to continue being so if she trusts them to be. An oddly placed pawn shop catches her eye. The thing stationed there, to the left of a building that seems to contain fairly pricey and well-insulated apartments for classier older people than she is, and to the right of a 3-story spa, seems like a flaccid dick hung out of the unzipped fly of the street facade. The windows say, pawn, sell, pawn, pawn. So that is something to distract herself with. Why so much emphasis on the pawn? And is 3 pawns to 1 sell the equivalent of 1 pawn to no cells? Lucy shakes her head roughly at this, calls herself dolt. Obviously, they want to let on that they sell. They merely want to downplay it. But would it be the equivalent to, say, on a slightly more windowed shop, have 6 pawns and 2 cells? Another cigarette. Lucy is thinking not. That, while the same in proportion, nonetheless would indicate an attempt to honestly point out the cell, lest it get lost in all those pawns. So, Lucy says, she can speak aloud. She is going to the library with her damnable ex-lover's literary journal getting finger-sweated wrinkles on its cover. Is it safe to go as far as saying that no matter the number of pawns, only 1 cell is appropriate? The multitude of pawns do nothing to alter the statement, like zeros to the right of a decimal. Alternate theory. There is only 1 cell to emphasize it, not to diminish, like a blot of orange on a room-size canvas of white. That orange isn't the least important part. You're overthinking this, Lucy. No, Lucy counters. The world is just more artful than I give it credit for, I think. Here is an observation. Lucy should be more agitated than she is. And here is another. She is agitated but in that way wherein she does not know how to portray it. Here's an extrapolation from that. Lucy is always agitated. Her calm ought never be seen as calm, but rather a deaf-mute attempt at learning a language based only on sight. And here is another observation. This is some swaddlecloth that Lucy infants into when her faculties are overwhelmed and she actually has to think in order to act. Meaning, her body is at trot, but nobody is actually trotting it. Another thing one might venture to say, Lucy JINX, adding up minutes into 2 columns of 2 different types, would have to be said to be most Lucy when she is not Lucy. Or, more simply, Lucy is Lucy by never being Lucy. Confusing? In an effort to make things more articulate but not quite precise, Lucy has spent most of her life not feeling as though she is herself. So the most common state, the normal her, is her feeling she is not her. Less confusing? The 2 most common states of Lucy are, as just explained, not feeling like Lucy in a conscious way, and not feeling like Lucy because she is technically not feeling like anyone. If her minutes were lined up and sorted, right now she is in between those 2 states, but nowhere near to feeling like Lucy, whatever that means. Even this, and even though she is aware of it, is a subconscious thought, felt instead of said in the sense of spoken internally, words in the brain. Along this street, looking for the library, she is aware of the words that are not words enough to say them, conscious of her unconscious thoughts. But see, she, as most people are, is always conscious of her unconscious thoughts. But then the thoughts are erased, thumbed to infinite pinhead-sized ants on a countertop getting too near your sandwich. Here is an observation. These are the lengths Lucy is going to avoid thinking about she knows what. Yes, Lucy is agitated. The library! And it was a library after all. Big push for Lucy's self-confidence, as now that it is all over with, she can admit she had grown increasingly certain she had been thinking of another town she'd lived in entirely. The sight of it, and it's a stately library with front door plump as a prized hog, brings on a curlicue of relaxation, and some specific things to do fall into slots of her future, coaxing out of her a sigh. The sky now wraps around things, settled in, the long dead band actor in an otherwise raucous old vaudeville. Lucy reasons it is good luck to have found a library she had grown doubtful of. Library had hemmed its way insistently into her thoughts. She had rested up the vague idea of a library she had never been to. She had basically drifted along, systematic as the drift may have been, until she came upon it. And now we'll go in. Left to chaos, order came. Library. Lucy, you need to trust more that your base programming works and that all seas are not choppy and colder as they go down. Even the option of a rotating door, a carousel door. Somebody had once called those, and Lucy had given them a bad time for it. Who had that been? Who had it been, Lucy? Never mind, because here is a long, needless antechamber, and when is the last time Lucy had been in a room palatial and unnecessary as this? And a library, arrogant book bin, pompous and grand as a grandma boastful of her most whorish night. If anything deserves a mawkish opulence like this entryway, it is a library. This room is designed for one purpose, letting you know you have left one place and entered another. This room exists the way light bulbs kill insects. Lucy slows on approaching the first human she encounters, a woman her own age, sitting at a front desk, books all hobnobbed around, some clean stacks, some stacks not yet straightened up, that stack as undone as pant fronts after a quickie in the corner, really almost cartoon tiptoes by, because eye contact would feel like getting caught, or like falling in love, or like both at the same time. Quite packed, this place, mostly with young men, studentish, lily-livered the lot, hoping upon hope that being able to prove an equation or quote a passage and give an interpretation of it will be all that is ever asked of them. Lucy sits, and it does feel at last, doesn't it, able to let go of Eliot's literary journal. There it is, perfect bound, matte finish cover, squatter than a magazine but not as svelte as a paperback, slender volume, slim, Eliot's name, once upon a time Lucy JINX's name, and in a way Lucy's name this time as well. But Lucy does not want to open it now. She wants to make these young men uncomfortable, to sinister their insides and ill-fit their pants in their thigh creases. Lucy, you were as young as these. Lucy, you made love to many. You met two of those ones in libraries, warehouses of the sorts, cute-haired and unaccomplished, pimples convinced they are acorns, as concerned with the lengths of their fingers as the pens they hold, as unaware of their postures as of the age of the words in the books that they read. Oh, Lucy, how you envy the youth of men, that pocket-turned-out gait to even the most well-dressed of them, the togethered way they are isolated. It had been your dream to be one, something blood-born wishing to grow up into a fever. They were so not you, Lucy, and all of their locks didn't seem to need keys. Wouldn't that have been darling to be, you'd thought, and thought, and thought, picked this or that to sit astraddle, and still not know the selfishness they selfished. Yours wasn't that. Those boys and their ways of reducing the world to food wrappers and wherever they wander to next. They're the polished front of a furnace. That's what Lucy had thought. Well, the best Lucy could manage was to be the word heat, with none of the details. No, neither the brightness, the curvature, nor the stab of the flame. Not roaming the shelves for more than 10 minutes, this young guy asks Lucy, "Do you work here?" She shakes her head and says, "Sorry, dude." The guy takes this in, then says, "Are you, familiar with the library?" She chuckles and smiles a bit wider, explaining she had never been in it before, had only been here for less than an hour. "I can be of no help," she shrugs. "That's okay." He sighs and heaves his shoulders the way a slug dreams it could, rounds that aisle there, and is gone. Lucy does not trust that wasn't a flirt. It was, even if it wasn't. Everything is notoriously Schrödingerian if it happens in a library, especially between boys and girls, women and men, women and boys, girls and men, boys and boys, women and women, men and men, girls and girls. And then say that again, and then that twice, backward ordered, because libraries make uncertain the everything of everyone, and so all bases have to be covered, and some invented to cover that base as well. These winks and flecks in the air, unavoidable, aren't dust motes, but normal microbial virus scrags made bloat enough to see. Books do that. They are petri dishes, bound pages are. The longer they go unread, the more potent, like barreled whiskey waiting to brown, browning, browned, waiting to sting, stinging, seeping in, waiting to use a body for plunder, then plundering. No one knows the results of what residue from this page of this book, mixed with that page of that, they are breathing, and no idea how that will chemically interact with their own physiology. When in a library, the infection is this. Breathing becomes the same as reading. You are not doing it. You are it. And the eyes of others feel that way on you because you are a word and they can see how you are spelled while you can't. A paragraph they can read and dissect that you can only be. And they are the same to you. In a library, what you become is reading, reading, reading. A pile of drowning last breaths that just keep never drowning. Curtis had done a spot-on imitation of these thriller novels. Now Lucy hears him in every single word she looks at. Uncanny. She even dwells in the area longer than she'd meant to, not the sort of place she can be seen for long, my goodness, as this, in her opinion, fortifies her with an excuse. My boyfriend does the best impression of this kind of writing, oh my God. No, you don't think Curtis is your boyfriend and don't want him to be, Lucy, and you don't have to worry about explaining that. It is the sensible way to say it in the fantasy of someone for some God knows why asking, looking at you queerly for being in this area where you are hoping they note you do not belong. If you said, my friend's boyfriend does the best impression of these books, now that would seem odd. That would give people ideas. Wait, what are you talking about, Lucy? Lucy has lost the thread. Give people what ideas? That you had aims on your friend's boyfriend? Yes, Lucy says, closing a book, taking up another. I get that. But why are you even thinking about that? Lucy blinks, stops reading to be confused. You hadn't been worried what other people would say if you stated the actual reason you are here. Who cares about that? You had been worried that you yourself were saying Curtis was your boyfriend because you thought it might mean, just because you said it, that that is even in some modicum true. Lucy blinks. Yeah? She says. That makes sense. That sounds like Lucy to Lucy. But that's so ridiculous, she says, starting to read again. You need to stop thinking like that, Lucy. I agree, she agrees. Shh, she shushes. Fuck off, she whispers. This is a library. She's still in the same tone of shushes. So you'd better be quiet then, she retorts. I'm just reading. Christ, you're so fucking weird, she underbreaths after a pause. Shh, she shushes, and this time she smiles at the shush, like her best friend had done it, both of their eyes aching with heat and pretending to read. Now here is Lucy JINX, pillow-forted behind 16 books of various types. She has the copy of Lindenwood open to Eliot's piece, and has borrowed a pen and been lent a good stack of blank paper from a roaming attendant as well. She is blocked out from the world, the most anonymous anyone can ever be, aware of every cough, shoe drag, carefully kept silent wind passing, hair tousle, page turn, bag rummage, shirt tug, knuckle crack, chair strain, whispered chit-chat, fan blade rotation, aware even of the submolecular creak of a shadow being made darker or lighter by motion or by change of electrical flow. This is what it must feel to be a toothache. Enamel protecting you as you madcap your mayhem within it. Lucy fits here as exactly as the bottom of a sock. Succulent nowhere, the citrus of the last place anyone could ever find her. She has outmaneuvered the world, herself even. She is a bedbug fornicating in a dystopia. So many bodies have dropped so suddenly in this apocalypse that the maggots breed enough generations to evolve a belief in God by the end of the first week. Or something like that. Lucy, you are practically giggling. So at ease you forget how to even spell shoulder. The only thing lacking is a cigarette. But that is okay. Something has to be lacking. A cigarette is not so much. If the reward is to never have to look up, to hear all, and be a synapse through which the daydream jostles, to see nothing, and be the signal that finally gets to tell the body you're asleep. You could be a story right now, Lucy. Yes, a bit lame to think in a library, but nonetheless true. You could have become a word in a book, and that book could have been burned. And the one person who remembered the book remembered every word but you when they rewrote it. Every word but you, Lucy. You could be that free. And it's okay that you're starting to cry. You've cried at less, Lucy, and at more. Maybe now you finally get to cry at just this exact much. Eliot's story gets better on each reread. How many times has Lucy read it now? 4 times. It's not long. Reading it over and over is like breathing in wine from a glass being tilted circularly with a barely tightened wrist. Is this really how you feel, Lucy? Eliot's story is that good. It is. In an entirely non-showy way. It is actual writing. It is honest now, whereas before it seemed hogwash and manufacture. Just because your name is in it now, Lucy? No. Or because Eliot's hair is now black? No. Or because while Eliot's hair is black, other of her hair is far from black? Grow up. Can't Lucy just like the writing? Sure, condescendingly, as though doing Eliot a favor. That is how Lucy likes Eliot's writing. Isn't Lucy allowed to be genuine? Well, sure. Is that what Lucy is being? Yes. The story is marvelous. It is out of the reach of having anything to do with Lucy, the way Eliot's slouch in that chair had been without Lucy's gravity, the way Eliot isn't hers. Lucy wishes she had read this and then met Eliot, but that would have been impossible, because, and here we are, that is what you see, Lucy. Eliot took you, processed you, made something out of what you said, but didn't make what you said. You are reading the result of you. And the result of you is, now you are not needed anymore. Is it a pleasant feeling? Further evidence of your impact in the world? Well, Lucy now cannot even tell if she is being sarcastic or not. What impact in the world? Your name in a book, Lucy. A journal, anyway. A story. Is that my impact in the world? Isn't it? Sure. Lucy doesn't care. This is all library drunk. This is just a moment in a dream. A hot piece of water in a fat cask of wine. Fuck. Eliot's story is beautiful. And that's right. That's just how Lucy told her to end it. And that's just how it ended. And that's what you're reading. The actual end. Written before the actual end.